The train slid into the small-town station, with a long, tired screech, like it was also exhausted from carrying too many stories and too much time. Ethan shifted his weight on his cane and waited for the doors to open. The metal beneath his feet vibrated softly. People stood up around him, reaching for bags and suitcases, talking over each other. He stayed still for a moment, feeling his heart beat harder than it should. He reached down and picked up the small velvet box from the seat beside him. His thumb rubbed the corner of it, over and over, like it was a worry stone. Inside it was the metal, the purple heart, a symbol of pain, courage, and loss. He wasn't sure yet what it meant to him. The doors slid open with a hiss. Ethan took a slow breath and stepped forward. His right hand gripped the top of his cane. His left sleeve hung empty and pinned neatly to his uniform. Every time he looked at that empty space, he felt a mix of pride and shame. Pride for what he'd done, shame for what he'd lost, and what it had cost others. His boot touched the platform. The air hit him like a wave of memories. Dust, old metal, a faint smell of oil from the tracks. The sharp, greasy scent of fried food from the small stall near the gate, where a man in a cap flipped samosas in hot oil. Somewhere, a child laughed. Somewhere else, a baby cried. Voices echoed under the high, dirty roof of the station. He was home, the same small town, the same narrow station, the same rusted iron benches and faded posters on the walls. It felt like time hadn't moved here. The only proof that it had was him. 7 years. 7 years since he'd last stood here. 7 years since the war started for him. 7 years since the last big fight with his father. 7 years since her. He adjusted his bag over his shoulder, feeling the pull on his muscles. His body still ached sometimes, especially when it rained. The doctors had said it might always be that way. He had learned to accept the limp, the cane, the empty sleeve, the stares. He could feel eyes on him now. People at the station glanced at him, then quickly looked away. Some stared a few seconds longer, eyebrows lifting at the sight of his missing arm and the army uniform. Others held pity in their eyes. He hated that look the most. He kept walking, step cane, the sound steady but uneven. The late afternoon sun shone through the gaps in the station roof and painted everything gold. The rusted sign with the town's name, the broken tiles, the narrow road visible through the gate. Dust floated in the light like tiny sparks. He passed a family gathered around an old suitcase, a mother fussing over her kids. A group of teenage boys leaned against a pillar, laughing too loudly. One of them nudged the other and nodded toward Ethan. Ethan pretended not to notice. Then he saw her. She stood near the exit, holding a small brown paper bag against her chest with both hands, as if it might slip away from her. For a second, Ethan thought his mind was playing tricks on him, that his memories were painting her into the scene because he expected to see her in this town. But then, she turned her head, and their eyes met. His breath stopped. Lena. Her hair was still dark, tied back in a loose ponytail, but a few strands had escaped and danced around her face in the light wind. She wore a simple blue dress that reached her knees, and old white sneakers that looked like they had carried her through many long days. There were faint shadows under her eyes, like sleep had not been kind to her for a long time. Her face was the same, and yet different, softer in some ways, harder in others, older, wiser, and full of something heavy he couldn't name. Her lips parted as she stared at him. "Ethan?" she whispered. The word barely made it across the space between them, but he heard it. He felt something open inside his chest, like a locked door suddenly pushed wide. Her voice slipped through and filled all the empty, hurt places. "Hey, Lena," he said softly. He tried to smile, but it didn't come out right. His lips trembled, his throat felt tight. She took a step forward, then another. Slowly at first, like she still wasn't sure if he was real. As she came closer, her eyes moved to his pinned sleeve. They lingered there for a second too long. He watched her, noticing, taking it in, feeling it. Her gaze dropped to the small velvet box in his hand. "The metal," she said quietly. He nodded. "Yeah. Purple heart. They're giving it formally today, at the town hall. Her eyes flicked back up to his face. For a moment, they just stood there, staring at each other, while the sound of the station blurred into the background. It was like someone had turned down the volume on everything else. Ethan could see 100 memories in her eyes. Summer evenings by the river, sharing ice cream from one cup because they didn't have enough money for two, whispered plans of leaving this town together. The night she cried in his arms begging him to stay. He swallowed hard. It's been a long time, she said, her voice soft, almost careful. 7 years, he replied. Since I left. He didn't say since I broke your heart. She didn't say since you chose the army instead of me. He took a tiny step closer, feeling more nervous now than he had before stepping into battle. You look different, he said, but also the same. A small, sad smile touched her lips. You look hurt, she said honestly, her eyes brushing over his cane, his empty sleeve, the thin scar on his cheek, but also stronger. He let out a short breath that was almost a laugh. Stronger, huh? Not sure it feels that way. Her gaze drifted toward the exit, where the road and town waited. Your father knows you're back? She asked. Ethan's jaw tightened. He looked away for a second, past her shoulder at the road outside the gate. Yeah, he said, forcing his voice to stay calm. He knows. The general wanted my family at the ceremony. They told him. They told everyone, I guess. And... Is he coming? She asked. He gave a short, bitter laugh that had no joy in it. He said he will. He wants to see what kind of pity medal they give to cowards who run from home. His words. Lena's eyes widened in shock. Her fingers tightened around the paper bag. He said that? She whispered. Pretty much, Ethan said. Nothing new, really. He always had a special way of showing love. The word love tasted wrong in his mouth when he used it about his father. Lena looked at him with a mix of anger and sadness, like she wanted to reach out and touch his face, but something held her back. Maybe time, maybe pain, maybe both. I'm sorry, she said. It's not your fault, he replied quickly. He's been like that since before you knew me. Before I knew myself. Ethan tried to read her expression. She seemed older, more guarded, but there was also a deep tiredness in her eyes, like she had been carrying something heavy and fragile for a long time, something she couldn't put down. Silence stretched between them for a moment. The air felt thick. I should go, Lena said finally, her voice shaking slightly. I didn't know you'd be on this train. I just came to pick up something. She lifted the paper bag a little, then hugged it closer again, as if she'd almost forgotten she was holding it. What's in there? Ethan asked gently, trying to keep the moment from slipping away. Her eyes dropped to the bag. It's for later, she said slowly. I'll see you at the ceremony. You're going too? He asked, surprised. Yes, she said, her jaw tightening. I have to. The way she said it made something twist inside him. There was weight in those words. Not I want to, not I thought I'd go. I have to. Her voice shook a little on the last word, and he felt it clearly now. Something was off. She wasn't just nervous about seeing him. There was something else, something bigger. A secret sat between them, like a shadow they both pretended not to see. Okay, he said, trying to sound light but failing. I'll see you there. She nodded. For a second it looked like she wanted to say more. Her lips parted, her eyes softened. But then she seemed to change her mind. She took a step back. Good to see you alive, Ethan, she whispered. Good to see you. Still here, he replied. She turned and walked away, her shoulders slightly hunched, as if the bag in her hands was heavier than it looked. The wind caught the edge of her blue dress, making it sway around her legs. He watched her move through the crowd, watched people step out of her way, watched her disappear into the town that had kept her while he was gone. Ethan stood there a little longer, his hand gripping the cane, his heart pounding with old feelings. He had come back for one main reason, to prove to his father that he wasn't a coward. To stand on a stage, accept a medal, and show the man who had always called him weak that he had survived something his father never knew. But as he stared at the empty spot where Lena had been, another thought began to grow quietly in his mind. Maybe this wasn't just about his father. Maybe the real unfinished pain wasn't only about the man who never believed in him, but also the woman he had left behind, the promises he broke, and the night 7 years ago when everything fell apart. The night he walked away from her. The night she tried to say something he refused to hear. Ethan took a long, shaky breath and finally moved toward the exit, the velvet box still in his hand. He had no idea that the ceremony waiting for him would not only expose his father, but also reveal what Lena had been hiding all these years. The town hall smelled like old wood, dust, and cheap perfume. Ethan stood near the front, close to the small stage where a microphone waited. A faded flag hung behind it, its colors washed out by years of sunlight and neglect. The hall was full, too full for his comfort. Rows of metal chairs scraped against the floor. As people shifted, whispered, and stared, some wore their best clothes for the big event. Old men in worn shirts buttoned all the way up, women in ironed dresses, kids with combed hair and shiny shoes that didn't fit quite right. It felt like the whole town had come to see the show. Ethan's uniform felt tighter than when he'd put it on that morning. The collar scratched his neck, and the air inside the hall felt heavy, like it was pressing down on his chest. His empty left sleeve was pinned neatly at his side. He could feel the eyes on it even when he wasn't looking. People tried not to stare, but they did, some with curiosity, some with pity, a few with admiration. He didn't want any of it. He adjusted his grip on his cane and tried to slow his breathing. He could feel his father's presence even before he turned to look. In the third row, slightly off to the side, his father stood with his arms crossed over his chest, jaw tight, eyes cold. He was older now, more gray in his hair, deeper lines on his face. But the expression was exactly the same look Ethan had seen as a boy whenever he made a mistake. "You're not enough." Ethan looked away. He didn't come here to fight his father again. He came because the general had asked, because there would be a ceremony, because this medal was supposed to be about bravery. Now, it just felt like another test. Lena sat on the left side of the hall, near the aisle. She wore a different dress now, a dark one, and her hair was still tied back. That same paper bag was on her lap, her fingers wrapped tightly around it. She hadn't opened it. She kept looking at Ethan and then quickly looking away, like there was something inside her that couldn't stay still. Sometimes, he caught her chewing her lip or rubbing her thumb over the folded top of the bag. He wondered what was inside and why it mattered so much. He also wondered if she regretted talking to him at the station, if seeing him had stirred old wounds, if she wished he had stayed gone. The mayor stepped up to the microphone and cleared his throat. His glasses slid down his nose as he shuffled some papers. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began in a tired but formal voice, "we are gathered here today to honor one of our own, a brave soldier, Sergeant Ethan Cole, who has returned home after serving our country with courage and sacrifice." Light applause moved through the hall. Ethan felt his stomach twist. He stared at the floor, his mind drifting away from the mayor's words. The speech was long and generic, filled with phrases like selfless duty, honor, and sacrifice. He'd heard similar things in hospitals, bases, and military events. They never quite captured the reality of blood, dirt, fear, and the sound of someone screaming your name in the dark. His thoughts slipped back to a small kitchen lit by a single weak bulb, back to the night 7 years ago. Lena's eyes had been swollen from crying. She'd stood by the sink with her hands gripping the edge of the counter so tightly her knuckles were white. "Why do you have to go?" she'd asked, her voice hoarse. "Why can't you stay? We can make it work here. We can build something. We can get married, Ethan. We can start a family." He had stood in the doorway, bag packed by his feet, anger and fear swirling inside him. "It's not that simple," he'd said, his voice low, trying not to shout. "I need to do this. I need to prove." "To your father?" she'd snapped. "Is that it? You need to prove yourself to a man who has never loved you the way you deserved?" "Don't talk about him like that," Ethan had muttered, even though a part of him agreed with every word. "He pushes you, insults you, breaks you down," she said, her voice shaking, "and you run to him for approval like a child who wants a gold star. What about me, Ethan? What about us?" He'd looked at her then, really looked. She was shaking, her lower lip trembling. Her hands had dropped from the sink to her stomach, pressing there. Without her even noticing. He'd seen it, the small movement, the way she kept touching her stomach. He'd felt a flicker of fear, a thought he pushed away quickly. No. She would tell him if there was something like that. She would say the words. She hadn't. Just say you'll stay, she had begged. Say you'll choose us. Say you'll choose me. He had stayed silent. The silence had been louder than any answer. From the living room, his father's voice had cut through the air like a blade. If he wants to go, let him go, his father called out. Maybe the army can make a man out of him. God knows I couldn't. Anger had burned through Ethan's chest. His fists had clenched. He had wanted to shout back, to say something cruel, something that would hurt. Instead, he picked up his bag. The next morning, he left. Now, standing in the town hall, Ethan's chest ached at the memory, the way Lena had looked at him that night, like something inside her had died, the way he'd walked out anyway. A loud squeal from the microphone dragged him back to the present. The mayor's speech was finally ending, and now, the mayor said, adjusting his glasses, we are honored to welcome a very special guest who has come personally to present this medal. Please welcome General Harris. There was more clapping now, stronger, more respectful. People straightened in their seats. A tall man in full dress uniform walked down the aisle. Sunlight from a high window caught the medals on his chest, making them sparkle. His steps were firm, confident. He carried the weight of command like a second skin. Ethan stood a little straighter, instinctively. As the general passed Lena's row, Ethan noticed it. Her whole body tensed. Her hands tightened on the paper bag, crushing its sides. Her eyes followed the general with a strange expression. Part fear, part relief, part something he couldn't name. Why did she look like that? What did she already know? The general reached the stage, nodded to the mayor, and took the microphone. Good afternoon, he said, his voice deep and controlled. It is my honor to be here today. He didn't read from papers. He didn't need to. Sergeant Ethan Cole, he said, turning his gaze toward Ethan. Would you please come forward? Ethan's heart thumped hard. His legs felt heavy, like someone had filled them with wet sand. He moved anyway. Step, cane, step. The sound of his cane on the floor echoed through the hall. As he walked past the rows of people, he could feel their eyes on him more than ever. He didn't look at them. He didn't look at his father. He didn't look at Lena. But he felt them. Especially her. He climbed the small steps to the stage and stopped beside the general. The man stood tall and straight, looking at Ethan with an expression that was more than just duty. There was something like respect in his eyes. And something else. Sadness, maybe. Up close, Ethan saw the lines of age and experience on his face. This was a man who had seen war too, a man who knew what medals really cost. We are here, the general began, turning back to the crowd, to honor the bravery of Sergeant Ethan Cole. But before I present this medal, I need to correct a misunderstanding. The room stirred. People glanced at each other. Ethan frowned slightly. A misunderstanding? He didn't have to wait long to find out what the general meant. The general turned his head and looked directly at Ethan's father. Mr. Cole, he said clearly, his voice carrying through the hall, I understand you have some doubts about the reason your son left home and what he did afterward. A murmur ran through the hall. Ethan's chest tightened. His father shifted in his seat and snorted loudly. Doubts? He said, not bothering to hide his words. I know why he left. He couldn't handle real responsibility. Went running off to play hero while we stayed here in the real world. Lena flinched. Ethan felt his face grow hot. The mayor looked nervous, but the general didn't seem bothered. Is that what you believe? The general asked calmly. That your son ran away? I don't believe it, his father shot back. I know it. He left his sick mother. He left his family. And now he comes back with half an arm and a pity medal, and we're supposed to clap? Whispers spread like smoke through the hall. Some people looked shocked. Others looked uncomfortable. Ethan's jaw clenched. He stared at the floor, his hands shaking. Shame and anger warred inside him. He had faced enemy fire with less fear than he felt now. Lena began to rise from her seat, her chest rising and falling quickly. She looked like she wanted to say something, like the words were burning inside her. but she didn't speak. She sat back down slowly, her fingers digging into the paper bag. Why won't she say anything, Ethan thought. What does she know? What is she hiding? He had lived through 7 years of war, but right now, facing his father's words in front of the whole town, he felt more exposed than ever. The general waited until the whispers quieted. Then he spoke again, voice firm. Mr. Cole, he said, this may be hard for you to hear, but your son did not run away from his family. He paused, letting the sentence hang in the air. He saved it. The room seemed to freeze. Ethan stared at the general, his mind spinning. Saved it? What is he talking about? Lena's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes filled with tears. She looked at Ethan, then at the general, as if a moment she had been dreading had finally arrived. Something deep inside Ethan shifted. All the old memories, all the unanswered questions, all the things left unsaid from 7 years ago. They rose up like ghosts. The general's words hit him like a second explosion. Everything he thought he knew about why he left was about to change. The hall fell so quiet that Ethan could hear the soft buzz of the old ceiling fan above and the distant sound of a car passing outside. The general's words hung in the air like smoke. He saved it. Ethan stared at him, confused, his heart pounding so hard it almost hurt. Saved it? Saved who? Saved what? The general let the silence sit for a moment. Then he spoke slowly, clearly, like every word mattered. 7 years ago, he said, your son enlisted after receiving information that your family was in danger. Not just from the world, not just from the economy or from sickness or from bad luck. He turned his gaze back to Ethan's father, but from you. The hall gasped as if it were one person. Someone dropped something. A child whispered, "What does he mean?" and was shushed quickly. Ethan felt the air leave his lungs. He stared at the general, then at Lena, then at his father. His thoughts crashed into each other. What are you talking about?" Ethan's father said, his voice suddenly smaller, weaker. "That's a lie. I'm his father." The general didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "A father is supposed to protect," he said quietly. Not break, not threaten, not fill a home with fear. He looked to the side where Lena sat, frozen. "Ms. Rivers," he said gently, "I believe this is your truth to speak." Lena's eyes widened. For a moment she looked like she might run. Her fingers dug so deeply into the paper bag that it crumpled and wrinkled. She forced herself to stand. Her legs trembled as she walked toward the front, each step deliberate. All eyes were on her now. Ethan felt his throat tighten. His cane felt heavier in his hand. When she reached the space near the front row, she stopped and turned around. She didn't look at his father, she looked at Ethan. "I told him," she said. Ethan swallowed. "Told who what?" he asked, his voice barely stable. Her eyes shone with tears, but they were strong. She looked at the general, then back at Ethan. "I told them everything," she said. 7 years ago. About your father, about that night, about what he did, about what he said he would do." The room seemed to shrink around them. Ethan's father shifted in. His chair, his face pale and tight. "You remember that night, Mr. Cole?" Lena asked, finally turning to face his father. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook. "You grabbed Ethan by the collar. You pushed him against the wall so hard a picture fell and broke. You told him that if he didn't man up, you would beat it into him, the way your father did to you." His father's jaw clenched. "I never—" "Yes, you did," Lena cut in sharply. "You did it in front of me. You told him he was useless, that he was a burden, that if he didn't become a real man, you'd make sure he regretted being born." The hall was silent. No one moved. Ethan remembered pieces of that night. His father's hands on his shirt, his back hitting the wall, the sound of something falling, his own anger, Lena crying. But now, hearing it out loud, it felt like someone else's memory, someone else's life. Lena took a shaky breath. "After you left that night, Mr. Cole," she continued, "I went to the police. I told them what happened. I told them how you shouted, how you used your hands, how you'd been like this for years. You know what they said?" She let out a small, bitter laugh. "They said it was a family issue. They said maybe you'd had a bad day. They told me to try to keep the peace." Ethan looked down, his fists clenched. "I was scared," Lena said. "Not just for Ethan, for myself, for..." Her voice faltered. She pressed her lips together, then kept going. So I went somewhere else. There was an army recruitment officer in town that week. I went to him. I told him everything. I begged him to help get Ethan out of that house before something worse happened. The general nodded slightly. That report reached my desk, he said calmly. We don't always step into family matters, but sometimes we must. He turned to Ethan. You thought you enlisted only to prove yourself, didn't you? He asked softly. To prove your father wrong. To show him you were strong. Ethan nodded slowly, stunned. Yes, sir. That's what I believed. That wasn't the whole story, the general said. We moved your paperwork faster because we knew. We knew you were running from something dangerous. And we knew if you stayed you might not survive it, or you might become like him. His eyes slid back to Ethan's father for a brief second. Murmurs spread through the hall again, sharper now, judgmental. People who had always greeted his father with nods and respect were now looking at him with something else. Disgust, shock, distance. Lena looked down at the paper bag in her hands and carefully opened it. The rip of the paper sounded loud in the quiet hall. She pulled out a small, worn photograph. Her fingers held it gently, like it was something precious and fragile at the same time. She walked forward, toward the stage, her steps slow but sure. Her eyes shone, but she didn't wipe her tears away. I did more than just speak about your father, she said, looking at Ethan now. I stayed silent about something else, something I should have told you, but I was scared, and angry, and hurt. She came to the small table beside the stage and carefully laid the photograph on it, face up, where Ethan could see. He stepped closer. In the photo, a little boy with dark hair and serious eyes stood in front of a school building. He wore a simple t-shirt and jeans. His shoes were scuffed. He was holding a drawing with both hands, a picture of a man in a uniform standing next to a little boy, both smiling. The little boy in the photo looked about 6. Ethan's breath caught. His throat closed. Who? His voice wouldn't come out properly. Lena's voice was soft, but it carried. This is Noah, she said. Your son. The word son hit him like a physical blow. He stared at the photo, at the boy's eyes, his eyes, at the shape of his nose, the way he stood slightly off balance, just like Ethan had as a kid. His fingers shook as he reached for the edge of the table, needing something to hold on to. I was pregnant. When you left, Lena said, her voice breaking for the first time. I tried to tell you that night. I kept touching my stomach. I thought maybe you'd notice. I thought maybe you'd ask. But you were so focused on your father, on leaving, on the army. You didn't see. Tears blurred Ethan's vision. I found out for sure a week after you were gone, she continued. I thought about writing you, calling you. But then... She swallowed hard. Your father came to my house. A cold feeling spread through Ethan's chest. He told me, Lena said, each word sharp, that if I tried to contact you, if I tried to trap you with a baby, if I tried to bring you back, he would make sure the child didn't bother this world for long. The silence that followed was heavy and horrifying. Someone gasped. Someone else whispered, "Oh my God." Ethan's entire body went cold. His stomach turned. His legs felt like they might give out. He said that? Ethan whispered, barely able to speak. He looked me in the eyes when he said it, Lena replied, glaring at Ethan's father. So I believed him. I stayed quiet. I raised Noah alone. I told him his father was a hero, that you left to protect us. I never told him about your father's threats. I never told him about this town. I wanted him safe. She wiped a tear from her cheek and looked back at Ethan. When the general called me, she said, he told me how your father talks about you, how he calls you a coward, how he mocks your Purple Heart. Her gaze hardened. For years I let my silence be my revenge. I kept your son from you. I told myself you didn't deserve him, that you chose your father over us. Her voice shook, but she didn't look away. But Noah, she smiled sadly. He kept asking, where's my dad? Did he forget me? I couldn't lie forever. When the general told me you were coming back, and that everything would be public, I knew it was time to tell the truth. Ethan stood there, tears running down his face, not even bothering to wipe them away. His chest felt full and empty at the same time. The general stepped forward again. He lifted the small velvet box from the table and opened it. The purple heart gleamed in the hall's dim lights, the purple ribbon rich against the dark lining. "Sergeant Ethan Cole," the general said, his tone respectful, almost gentle. "This medal is for your courage on the battlefield, for shielding your fellow soldiers from an explosion, for dragging 3 men to safety with 1 arm and 1 good leg, while you bled and refused to let go." He paused, then added quietly, "But long before that you were already surviving another kind of war. One without uniforms, one inside your own home." He turned his head, staring directly at Ethan's father. "You spent years calling him weak," the general said. "But today we see the truth. The boy you tried to break became a man who saved lives, while you let your anger destroy the family you were supposed to protect." The general pinned the purple heart to Ethan's chest, right over his heart. His hand pressed it gently, as if sealing something in place. The metal felt heavy, but for the first time it felt right. Ethan looked out over the hall. Some people were watching him with tears in their eyes. Some looked shocked. Others looked at his father with clear judgment. The image of his father, strong, loud, respected, was crumbling right in front of them. Ethan's father sank back into his chair. His shoulders slumped. His eyes were shiny, but he still didn't speak. His mouth opened a little, then closed again. No apology came. Lena stepped closer to the stage, her voice soft but steady. "Noah's waiting outside," she said. "I didn't bring him in. I didn't want him to hear all this." "Not yet." Ethan's throat tightened again. Do you think he'd want to meet me?" he asked. A small, gentle smile touched her lips. "I told him his father was a hero," she said, "and today, I get to be right." A broken laugh escaped Ethan, mixed with a sob. He nodded. He looked at his father one last time. The man who had spent a lifetime making him feel small now looked smaller than anyone in the room. Ethan realized something in that moment. He didn't need his father's approval anymore. He didn't need his father's love. He had a medal on his chest, and a son outside who had never even met him, but already hoped the best about him. That was enough. He turned away from his father and stepped down from the stage. Each tap of his cane on the floor felt like a closing door. The town watched as he walked through the hall, Lena by his side, the photo of Noah still on the table behind him like a promise. No shouting, no threats, no violence. This was his revenge, truth, exposure, walking away. The man who had mocked him was now sitting in a room full of people who finally saw who he really was. Ethan pushed open the heavy wooden door of the hall. The sunlight outside was bright, almost blinding after the dim interior. He blinked a few times. Near the steps, a small boy with a backpack swung it back and forth, kicking at a stone, glancing at the door every few seconds. Dark hair, serious eyes. A little frown of concentration. Ethan's heart stuttered. "Is that him?" he whispered. Lena nodded beside him, her voice filled with warmth and fear all at once. "Yes," she said. "That's Noah." Ethan wiped his face quickly with the back of his hand and took a breath that shook on the way in. His legs felt weak, but his heart felt strong. He took a slow step forward. "Hey, buddy," he said, his voice unsure but soft. Noah turned. For a second he just stared. Then his eyes lit up like someone had turned on a light inside him. "Dad?" the boy said, hope and wonder mixed in his small voice. Ethan felt something inside him break and heal at the same time. He nodded, unable to speak for a moment. He opened his arm wide. Noah didn't hesitate. The boy ran toward him, small sneakers slapping the ground, backpack bouncing. Ethan bent as much as he could and hugged his son with his one arm, holding on like he never wanted to let go. He felt Noah's small arms wrap tightly around his neck. He smelled soap and dust and the faint scent of crayons. "Do you want to come home with us?" Noah asked, pulling back just enough to look at him. Ethan laughed through his tears. "Yes," he whispered. "This time, I'm coming home for real." Behind them, the town hall door closed slowly. Inside, a broken man sat alone with his shame. Outside, under the open sky, a soldier with a purple heart finally found the only title that truly mattered. Dad.